Good morning. Happy holidays. Welcome to the virtual Sunday service for the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Lake Norman. Our fellowship walks diverse paths to find meaning and purpose, but we are united by our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all and the obligation to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. My name is Harvey Wigder. There have been no voting irregularities, so starting January 1st, I will be the fellowship's president. Last time, I tried to light the chalice. I had problems with matches, and I've solved those problems. I'm now going to light the chalice. This is by Albert Schweitzer. At times our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to thank with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Before we get to Reverend Jobe's service, I want to read some words to think about. This comes from one of my favorite books, Seussisms, and it's a guide for those to life who are just starting out and those already on their way. This one comes with this picture, which shows a wise old man talking to a young fellow on the cliff. And he says, "Be grateful. When you think things are bad, when you feel sour and blue, when you start to get mad, you should do what I do. Just tell yourself, ducky, you're really quite lucky. Some people are much more, oh, ever so much more, oh, muchly much more unlucky than you." Now I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Jobe, and after he speaks, we'll hear from Mike Elec. He will have a musical interlude, and then I'll be back.
When I started work on this sermon, I had just lived through weeks of working with a homeless couple who have a new baby. It sometimes felt like having my foot caught in a bear trap. Okay, in all honesty, I have no idea what it feels like to have your foot caught in a bear trap, but it was frustrating. When dealing with homelessness, there are so many hurdles. And when I was tempted to quit, my beloved, big-hearted, generous life partner, Gabriel, would refill my tank with radical acceptance. We've all been there. We've dealt with challenges that felt like they were just too much. In the blurb for this sermon, I mentioned a friend I knew in college who would ball up his fists and say, "I just can't take it." He was very emotional. And he would cry out in anguish, sometimes at the most ordinary circumstances, but also when there were pretty serious circumstances. "I just can't take it." But he took it. I noticed over and over again, he took it, sometimes with grace and style. He would say he couldn't take it, but regardless of how trapped his foot felt in a bear trap, he would take it. Life goes on. So is radical acceptance a better, smoother, easier path? One of the saddest stories of my life involved my trying to convince my 14-year-old daughter to stop screaming and yelling at me. We were going to be late to school, and when she realized it, she lost control. She screamed and yelled. As we were driving along toward school, I very calmly said, "Screaming and yelling isn't going to change anything. I'll get you to school as fast as I can. In hindsight, I think about the only thing that could have helped me was for me just to remain silent and endure her Category 5 hurricane screams and yells through radical acceptance. But I was not that wise. I was not that radically accepting, and I made the terrible mistake of saying for a second time, screaming and yelling is not going to help anything. I'll get you to school as fast as I can. At which point she began to beat me mercilessly. And I was driving the car. We both ended up in tears. That was 20 years ago. And I would still contend that screaming and yelling really doesn't change things, and I did get her to school as fast as I could. And yes, for the record, I did hit her back. The only time in my life I have ever hit a woman. Truth be told, I haven't hit a lot of men either. Violence is generally not my karma. But when being assaulted by a high school soccer player while driving a car, I felt like I needed to defend myself. That might have been handled better too. In that story, radical acceptance would have helped. If I could have just kept my mouth shut, she would have eventually stopped yelling and screaming. The drive was about 15 minutes, and that's plenty of time to let a yelling and screaming fit run its course. Some of you may be thinking that that kind of radical acceptance would have been foolish, and she might have gotten the idea that yelling and screaming was okay. Good choices in that situation. I disagree. I think I should have kept my mouth shut. As long as personal safety is not an issue, yelling and screaming will sooner or later run its course in ways that allow life to move on. Like Category 5 hurricanes, sooner or later, they end. Or, as I have often told myself about many uncomfortable situations, it's like going to the dentist. It always ends. When 2 Unitarian Universalists were shot dead in Knoxville in July of 2008, the shootings took place during a rehearsal for the musical Annie. That musical includes the song, "The Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow." Within a day or so of the shooting, the Presbyterian Church next door held a memorial service for the dead and a solidarity service for the wounded, which at an emotional level included the whole community. During that service, the young people who had been rehearsing before the shooting sang that song. The sun will come out tomorrow. Bet your bottom dollar there'll be sun. Just pick up your chin and grin and say, tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. I love you tomorrow. You're only a day away. It's not hard to imagine there was not a dry eye in the house. The Spartanburg UU congregation held a memorial and solidarity service within a few days of the shooting, and one of our members was asked, after what happened, how can you think of going back to that church? And her response was, after what happened, how can I think of being anywhere else? We drew a huge crowd to that service. That is radical acceptance. Yes, there were tears, lots and lots of tears. There may even have been some yelling and screaming, but there was also singing by young people who had seen their fellow cast members shot dead only 2 days before. Sometimes we are forced by our own emotional wiring to yell and scream, but sometimes we reach deep for the best within us to sing, "The sun will come out tomorrow." And I expect practice will make perfect. A friend recently told me he can anticipate the storm brewing, and he begins to breathe, and seek out dissipation of his anger, frustration, fear, judgment, whatever might load his guns and fire his stormy responses. He considers it a form of emotional intelligence, but also a form of physical prowess, like an improved golf shot or more rigorous exercise routine. We all know the drill. Think before we speak. Be more attentive to our listening than to our speaking. Take it easy. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we learned that take it easy is a good phrase to print up and hang on the wall. Therefore, we can see it every day. One day at a time is another, although the great prophet of self-improvement, Dale Carnegie, amended one day at a time. He said, that's good advice until you're in crisis. When you get into a genuine crisis, maybe trap your foot in a bear trap, it's hard to live one day at a time. Dale Carnegie recommends 5 minutes at a time in those situations. Prayers, deep breaths, meditations, affirmations should be able to get us through the next 5 minutes. Maybe the key to radical acceptance is time management. We may, on the rarest occasions, realize there is nothing to do but yell and scream and ball up our fists and pound the table in front of us. Hopefully, those will be the rarest of exceptions. But even then, if we can find a clock and beg our attending angels to stay with us, we can get through the next 5 minutes with some sense that life is worth living. That would be radical acceptance in the worst of times. Why does it matter? What good would come of it? Ultimately, it costs too much to yell and scream and pound our fists on the table in front of us. It ends up making us hoarse and leaves us with sore hands. We desperately need the serenity that comes of accepting the things we cannot change. The great poet, singer, songwriter John Prine wrote, "It don't do no good to get angry, so help me I know. For a heart stained in anger grows weak and grows bitter. You become your own prisoner as you watch yourself sit there, wrapped up in a trap of your very own chain of sorrow." Gandhi said we should use our anger by turning it into heat. Heat that can change the world. Radical acceptance would allow such a path. If we accept reality just as it is, we can also accept that we have more energy to affect change. It may not be much, but it is often a gracious plenty. When Natalie Helling works with the Davidson Village Network, change is affected for the good in the lives of isolated senior citizens. When Claudia and Alan and Jim and Dick and others of us build a dog fence for a dog that has been living on a chain, good comes of it for a dog liberated to run freely. And good comes of it for the human-dog relationship that obviously improves. Dog chained, not so good. Dog free to run in a large fenced area, much better. When Nicole and Karen and Sandy and others of you wrote postcards to voters during the election, it raised up the kind of political energy needed to effect badly needed change in Washington. The list goes on and on. Radical acceptance does not mean sitting back and doing nothing. It means breathing deeply of the emotional intelligence to effect change where we can without yelling and screaming and bruising our hands on the table in front of us. Sometimes it means, for this one day, we have done all we can. Tomorrow comes. The sun will come out tomorrow. Bet your bottom dollar there'll be sun.
Morning, everyone. Hope you're having a great break. This is called Don't Let a Good Thing Fall Behind. On this chosen path we pave, for every moment we can save, all the distance to the final line. Don't you let a good thing fall behind. sky is dark around you, constellations will arise. Lift your head, feast your eyes. Don't you let a good thing fall behind. Isn't life a giant wheel? Oh, the ride begins when you get on. Put the fire to your heel, boys, before your riding days are gone. Don't you let no cloud of thunder wash away that sunny day. Don't let your smile slip away. No, don't you let a good thing fall behind. On this chosen path we pave, for every moment we can save all the wonders in this grand design. Don't you let a good thing fall behind. Don't you let a good thing fall behind. Never let a good thing fall behind. No, don't you let a good thing fall behind. Take care. Have a great holiday, everybody.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Mike. You both did your usual wonderful job. I want to start out by giving special thanks to people who you might not have thought of thanking before, and those are the worship coordinators. They're people like me who introduce the service, and I want to thank those people. I want to thank Elaine. I want to thank Nancy. I want to thank Jim. I want to thank Sandy. I want to thank Lynn, and continue to thank the person I thanked last week, Gail, for contacting our speakers. You know, to be a host of these things, or a worship coordinator, there's more to it than you might think. First, there's the courage to face the camera. You might not think that's a big deal, but if you have to look at yourself after you do one of these, you'll understand. And besides just being an MC, they work with the speaker before he's there. They make sure everything's delivered on time, that we have a summary of the speech, and that everything is done right. So thank you to you people. You've been wonderful, and you've been an important and integral part of the service. Last week, we had our annual meeting. And at that meeting, we elected our officers. But we didn't really finish. We didn't. That's because the voting gap that we had didn't work the way it was supposed to. So I'll be sending out a letter to everybody asking them to confirm our selection of the nominating committee, and most important, to choose our social justice initiative for the year. If you're a visitor, welcome. We're getting a lot of visitors lately now that we're virtual. I don't know who you are or where you're from, but I'm pleased you give us a try. If you like what you've heard so far and are wondering how to stay connected or get involved with our congregation, reach out to our membership chair, Linda. Her email address can be found right here. We're still waiting to collect our pledges. We really need this if we're going to continue and build our congregation. So if you haven't done it yet, get it done. We encourage our members to continue reaching out to each other virtually whenever possible. And I want to end by reading this from Dr. Seuss. It's cherish diversity. We see them come, we see them go. Some are fast, and some are slow. Some are high, and some are low. Not one of them is like another. Don't ask us why, just ask your mother. The chalice is now out. Go out, enjoy New Year's, and blessed be.